Welcome to our weekly program, Belahdan, a show with an accent for those without one. Obama just took a trip to Africa. Also, is lecturing the Africans about democracy, and it's fascinating how the West go to Africa and always lecture them. We have this dentist going to Africa, killing this lion. $50,000 to go to have the privilege of killing a lion. That's really a white privilege that is exercising in another country. We have here a Professor David Schultz. He's with the Hamline University. He always comes here to explain to us it's American politics. Welcome to Belahdan.
Thank you for having me again.
I know we're going to talk about Obama's trip, but can we stay home a little bit and we'll talk about the Republican primary debate?
Sure.
This is very unprecedented when a media decided who should be in a debate.
Yes.
And we have 10 different candidates, or what we call them hopeful.
That's right.
So what is your take on this president and what the debate, the dynamic, the issue, and the stardom, the 15 minutes fame of Donald Trump?
Okay, let's start with saying that it was not a debate, really. It was a media event more than anything else. A debate is where you talk about substantive issues, where people get to make positions and they question one another. It wasn't that at all. I described what we saw on Thursday night was a Jerry Springer show without Jerry Springer. Okay.
And did they present it as a debate?
It was supposed to be a debate, but it really wasn't. And the reason why I describe it that way is that if this was meant to be a debate on presidential politics or on the future of the country, the questions that would have been asked would have been questions maybe about, for example, if you were president, would you have negotiated the nuclear treaty with Iran differently? Or if you were president, what would you do about global warming? It would be about issues that really matter.
And matter to the people who are watching. This
exactly.
is the biggest rating in any debate.
The highest rating ever in any debate, short of a real presidential debate, when it gets to the final ones.
Yeah.
But instead, this was, as I said, a media event in the sense that the very first question was directed really to Donald Trump, asking him effectively, would you honor the Republican presidential endorsement? And if not, would you run as a third-party candidate? And he said no. And the reason why I say that is that question was meant to get Donald Trump excited and meant to start really the fight. And that's really what we saw on Thursday night, a long fight that featured Donald Trump.
All-star wrestling, whatever.
Yes, maybe WWF at its best.
WWF, probably. But so the folks at Fox know this.
Yes.
And they frame it that way for rating, or are they really the voice of the Republican Conservative Party? So beside the rating and the money advertising,
right,
what is the agenda of Fox and as a network that is really way to the right?
Right. I mean, essentially, as we know, Fox, national is really sort of the media spokesperson for the Republican Party. And I think what they tried to do that night was to really set up Donald Trump, that Donald Trump is an irritant for the Republican Party. And it's odd because the positions that he takes against women, against immigrants, are all the positions that the Republican Party takes. It's just that he's honest about them. I mean,
and he has the highest
approval rating.
Yeah,
because I think about it. If you watched the debate the other night, all the other candidates also came out against women's right to choose. You've had candidates come out and attack gay, lesbian rights. You have candidates all these other candidates who are taking positions against the poor. They want the benefit of racism and sexism, but without owning up to the responsibility for it. And in many ways, Donald Trump is just honest about it. He is just honest in the sense of saying that he thinks that all the Mexican immigrants are what, rapists and criminals. He doesn't like women. And so the Republicans are embarrassed by him because he is what the party has become. And so I think in part Fox, as the spokesperson for, or the media organ for the mainstream Republican Party, sets him up with the hope that what?
Is he that dumb?
Donald Trump?
Because the way he talks about the host, Kelly, Megyn Kelly,
Sure.
about, that's, I mean, it seems like sometimes he comes across like honest and smart and he knows what he's doing.
Right.
Sometimes he comes out like,
a buffoon.
A used car salesman.
Yeah, I think he's never used to being challenged. He is a CEO. He's had this.
He fire people.
Right. His most famous line, and we're going to talk about that, is "You're fired." From the I think it's the show The Apprentice. He's used to never being challenged. He's used to everybody catering to him. He's never had to be accountable for his language. And so that's part of his success. He's been able to run around.
It works in business.
It works in business, and it works in some circles in politics, just to sort of speak your mind and to sort of just bluster. And so in a race where there are 16, 17 declared Republican candidates, he's carved out a niche for himself, a niche of about 20% of those people who consider themselves Republicans, which, by the way, remember, according to polls, only 32% of the Americans identify as Republicans. So he's got 20% of 32%. He's got barely what? He's got about 7% of the population that agrees with him. That's his surge. Anyhow, the point that I'm getting at here is that he speaks for a small spectrum. He's been a CEO, never had to be held accountable, and he thinks he can get away with whatever he wants.
But that 7% is still a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
And he kind of touched on some of the rage and anger that a lot of Americans have.
Yes.
And frustration of having an African-American president in the last 7 years.
Sure.
There's a lot of angry white American out there.
Yes, there is.
Is he speaking to these people in primary?
Yes, he is. He is speaking to sort of two populations of people. We know he's speaking to older white Caucasian males, and in general, those who are the second group, uneducated Caucasian males.
It's a pickup.
Yep. And they're frustrated. They're looking around. They're seeing their wages go down, their jobs go away, and it's easy to say what? It's that African Americans president's problem. It's those
immigrants.
It's those immigrants. It's those Iranians, or it's those terrorists. It becomes saying it's somebody else, and that's what Donald Trump is appealing to: is that resentment, that anger, that frustration that these individuals are facing.
It's really one of the clips that was sent to me. One of them, I don't know his name, Cruz or whatever. He said we need a president like General Sisi. Now our ideal and model, a dictator, a fascist, that has been running Egypt now like North Korea, now in a national debate.
Yes.
It's becoming like a conversation. We need a strong person. That's what Egyptians said about the Sisi. We need a strong person you can fight terrorism.
Right.
Are we going to that direction?
Well, that's a scary part. There is this. Richard Hofstadter, an American historian back in the 50s and 60s, wrote two really good books. One was, and the titles say everything. One was called The Anti-Intellectualism in American Life, and the other was called The Paranoid Style in American Politics.
There's a quote about this.
Yes, right. And there is this paranoid anti-intellectualism in America that really goes back, I would say, to the Salem witch trials. Go back to when we burned a bunch of women thinking they were witches. And there's always been this kind of sense among some people of sort of fear. Fear and prejudice. And we have a history in this country of doing stupid things when fear and prejudice enter. And so there is this segment. And when I listen to the Republicans, with the exception of Rand Paul, he's the only one who's taking a slightly different position. The rest of them really support what? Increased surveillance of Americans, more crackdowns in terms of civil liberties, restrictions on voting rights. That sounds an awful lot being like a fascist to me.
What are they afraid of? When they have the business, they have Wall Street, they have the economy, they have corporate America, corporate media. What are those Republican candidates or the Republican Party afraid of?
That's a really good question. Because,
what are they afraid of?
Yeah, because I think they're afraid of a demographic. And what I mean by that, the clock is slowly ticking against them in two different ways. Within the United States, the percentage of the population that is white, Caucasian, Christian is rapidly fading. I mean, for them, America was built around the basic C's: the Constitution, capitalism, and Christianity. And I could say a fourth, Caucasianism. Okay, so those are the four C's, the privileges, and all four are changing. Depending on what the numbers are, within the next 20 years or 30 years, will be a non-majority Caucasian. The percentage of our population that is Christian is changing. And I think it's a fear. It's a fear of change. Back in the early 90s, I taught in San Antonio, Texas, at a time when Henry Cisneros was mayor. And I say that because it was at a time when San Antonio was shifting from being majority Caucasian to being majority non-Caucasian. And I saw a lot of similar things. The whites were afraid, and I thought, why should they be afraid? They run the banks. Yeah. They run the corporations. They hold all the toys.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how many minority here, as long as they are, cleaning our bathroom or putting the roof on, and then we'll talk about who own the power.
That's right. And the Republican establishment, or those who are with the Republican establishment, still control Wall Street. They control the banks. In the last several years, even though they criticize Obama, Obama's bailout did what? It bailed out the banks.
He saved capitalism.
He saved capitalism from itself. So, if anything, they ought to be bowing to Barack Obama for how much he saved, because by the time it was all said and done, Obama more or less continued the policies of the Bush administration when it came to bailouts. And I've seen numbers that have suggested that by the time we include loans, grants, and credits, it was in the trillions of dollars that we spent to bail out capitalism. And so, you're right, they control everything. But yet, I think there's this fear, cultural fear that something is ticking away.
Someone once said it takes a liberal to execute a conservative policy, like Begin, peace with Sadat, Nixon, China.
Right.
Clinton, demolish
welfare.
Is Obama saying, would anybody other than Obama would have done what he done to Wall Street and corporate America and all of that? I mean, when we look at Obama as a liberal African American, African America is not really, what happened in the last 7 years is not like the best 7 years of their history. I mean,
no,
there's a lot of police brutality and job, So I don't know why they're angry at Obama.
I don't know. First, we have to start with the proposition here. Obama the liberal? No. At best, Obama the old-fashioned moderate Republican. When I think of the Affordable Care Act, his signature piece of legislation wasn't single-payer, wasn't what the liberals wanted. It was essentially what? The proposal that the Republicans came up with back in the 90s as an alternative to the Clinton health care. Remember, Obamacare was modeled under what Mitt Romney, the Republican, came up with, Republican nominee in 2012. Dodd-Frank, which was the major piece of legislation to sort of reorganize the banks, was really pro-banking legislation. And when I look across the board, I really don't see Obama as the liberal. Now, granted, he's been pulled by the Republican Party, but take us back to 2008. He was probably the third or fourth most liberal of the candidates running. He wasn't the most liberal. And so what he hasn't addressed are some of the really core problems. Many homeowners still are underwater in terms of their houses. Many people of color, as you mentioned before, are still facing enormous discrimination. In fact, there's indications of surveillance, infiltration, and oftentimes entrapment, and really this racial profiling that they're doing is doing more to radicalize and more harm than it is to actually solving that problem.
We're not going to solve it right
That's
now,
right.
But thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It's so fun.